Hi, welcome. We're going to look at the Chapter 4 review today on solving equations. I'm going to work out a few of the problems from the beginning of the review, and then there will be videos for the next couple problems and so on. So if you have questions about your review, you can hopefully get them answered before you take your quiz. So number 1 and 2 here, we're going to solve the equations. I said make sure you check your solutions. So we're going to look at number 1. There's a couple ways this one can be solved. First thing we can do here, we notice that it's quadratic. Okay, we've got our x inside of some sort of grouping symbols here. Anytime you see that your variable is inside some grouping symbols, a lot of times we want to take it and try to isolate the grouping symbols. This isn't the only way to solve it, but this is one of the methods. If there's time, I'll show you a second method for solving it as well. So I have negative 2 times something plus 12 equals negative 60. I'm going to start out by getting rid of the positive 12, or I'm going to undo the adding 12 by taking 12 away from each side. Now we're left with negative 2 times the quantity of x minus 5 squared equals negative 72. Now we've got negative 2 times something equals negative 72. Well, negative 2 times a positive 36 would equal negative 72. And we get that positive 36 when we divide each side by negative 2. Trying to get these grouping symbols by themselves. So after I do this, I actually have x minus 5. That quantity squared equals 36. Now there's a couple approaches that can be taken from here. Depending on your teacher, you may be asked to show different steps or different methods. Main thing that you need to understand though is that you've got something squared equals 36. You should be able to recognize that there's two values that we could square to get 36. 6 and negative 6. Which means that what we have inside of here has to either equal 6 or negative 6. Now if you're asked to undo the square, remember you would just take it and take the square root of each side. Some teachers will make you show this, some won't. Just as long as you're understanding that there's the two answers, like I said, that's the key. So I have x minus 5, and we take the square root of something squared, that would leave us with absolute value brackets there, because remember we're going to have two answers. So that means that x minus 5 could either equal 6 or it could equal negative 6. Then we're going to add our 5 to each side and we'll get x equals 11 or x equals negative 1. Okay, so to check it, we could take it and plug those back in. I'm going to tell you for time's sake that they both work. I wanted to quickly describe another way for solving it. If you wanted to, you could take this here and you could FOIL out the x minus 5 squared, then distribute your negative 2 through, then you would take it here and simplify and factor. I'll do that real quick here so you can see it. So if you chose to FOIL this first, like I said, it's going to have to be your decision which way you do it. That would leave us with x squared minus 10x plus 25. Then we have plus 12 equals negative 60. And we distribute our negative 2 through, so now we're looking at negative 2x squared plus 20x minus 50, and then plus 12 equals negative 60. We can finish combining our like terms on the left side. We've got negative 2x squared plus 20x, and then negative 50 and positive 12 is going to give us a negative 38. Right now that still equals negative 60. Now I got a negative 2x squared. I prefer to have positives here, so that means I could take it and I can move everything over to the other side if I wanted to, or I could add 60 to each side and then basically multiply everything by a negative. And that's what I'm going to do here, so I think it's just going to be a little bit faster. So I'm going to add 60 to each side, so I'm setting it equal to 0. Again, it's quadratic, that's why we're doing that. And that would be what? Positive 22 there equals 0. Now if I want to flip my signs here, I can multiply everything times a negative 1, or just basically flip all my signs because it's an equation and it'll still be equal. Or I see here that I have a common factor of 2. I could go ahead and factor out a negative 2 and flip my signs that way. So I'd have x squared. Negative 2 times a negative 10x gives me that positive 20x. A negative 2 times a negative 11 gives me positive 22. Now, since this has no variable attached to it, it really doesn't mean much to us. We could divide both sides by negative 2 and not even worry about it. I'm just going to focus on my trinomial now. This should factor into 2 binomials. Signs should be different because we have a negative 11, so we're looking for factors of 11 that have a difference of 10. That would be a negative 11 and a positive 1. We'd set each of those equal to 0 to do our zero product property here. And you'll see we get x equals 11 and x equals negative 1. Exact same answers we got over here. Okay, just a different approach, but both will work for you. I think this one is a little bit faster if you're talking about being efficient and getting through your test or quiz so that you can go back and check your answers. You want to look at this first method. This one will still work though. All right, let's look at number 2. We have 3x over 2 minus x over 5 equals 8x plus 5 over 10. So since we've got rational expressions here, or just fractions, we want to get rid of the denominators. I'm going to multiply both sides by 10 because 10 is divisible by 2, 5, and 10 itself. So here we go. Let's I'm going to take this, I'm just going to switch my color here real quick so that you can see it a little easier. So we're multiplying everything on both sides by 10. So what we've got here is a 10 times 3x over 2 minus 10 times x over 5 equals 10 times the quantity of 8x plus 5 over 10. Now here's the thing, you don't have to show this step, and not everybody does, but if you're struggling and don't understand what's going on, that's why I'm showing it. The reason we multiply by 10 is because that 10 is divisible by 2, it's divisible by 5, and it's divisible by 10, which is going to help get rid of our denominators. So 10 divided by 2 is going to be 5, so we're left with 5 times 3x minus 10 divided by 5 is 2, so we have minus 2x, or 2 times x, equals, and this 10 divided by 10 is going to give us 1, so we're going to be left with more or less just 8x plus 5. Now 5 times 3x is going to give us 15x minus 2x. Combine those, we've got 13x equals 8x plus 5. We're going to subtract 8x from each side here, so we're going to have now 5x equals 5, and that means then that x is going to have to equal 1. Now to check it, you would want to take it, plug it back in, go through and make sure it works. I'll leave you the opportunity to do that with you on your calculator or on paper, however you wish to do it. But for time's sake, I'm going to move it on so that you can get some more problems in here. Let's look at 3 and 4. Again, we've got x in grouping symbols, so we're going to have to get it out. The way we get it out there is to first isolate the grouping symbols. So if you have a square root or something in there, we got to get rid of what's either being added or subtracted to it, and then what's being multiplied or divided by it there. So let's go ahead and let's add 23. (19) plus 23 is going to be 22, 32, 42, I believe. And now we've got 3 times the square root of 3x plus 1. If we divide each side by 3, we'll know that the square root of 3x plus 1 is going to have to equal 14. Now, here's where we sometimes run into problems. You got to think about, what is this statement saying? The square root of something equals 14. So if we want to undo the square there, we're going to, the square root, we're going to square both sides. I know that the square root of 196 is equal to 14. And this is where we kind of get that. We square this side and we're left with 3x plus 1. And when we square 14, we get 196. Now we'll subtract 1 and then divide by 3 to get our answer. So divide each side by 3. And 3 should go into 95. Let's see. X will then equal, 3 goes into 180 60 times, so we got 5 more, so 65 should be our answer. If you're not sure if that's right, plug it in and check it. I know it's right, so I'm going to move on. Number 4, we have 2 times the absolute value of 2x minus 6, and then we're going to add 4 to that, and that should equal 8. So again, x is inside of the grouping symbols here, so we need to isolate the grouping symbols first. We're going to subtract 4. So we're going to have 2 times the absolute value of 2x minus 6 equals 4. Now 2 times something equals 4. Well, we know that the value of this would have to be 2 then, because that's what makes sense. So we're going to divide each side by 2, and you'll see that the absolute value of 2x minus 6 equals 2. And now there's 2 values that have an absolute value that equals 2. Those 2 values are 2 and negative 2. So 2x minus 6 is either going to have to equal 2, or 2x minus 6 has to equal negative 2. And then we just finish solving. So 2x would equal 8. So x would equal 4. On the other side, we add 6. We get 2x is equal to 4. We divide each side by 2, and we get x equals 2. We take those and we plug them back in. That's 8. 8 minus 6 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 4 is 8. That one checks out. And on this side, 2 times 2 is 4. Minus 6 is negative 2. The absolute value of negative 2 is 2. Times 2 is 4. Plus 4 is 8. That checks out also. So these are the first 4 problems from the review. Hopefully if you had any questions, this helped to answer them. If you have additional questions, make sure you ask your teacher. Thanks for watching.